Well, Kyle,
Yes, Garrett.
it's time to start Walker.
Here. Feel. Think. Voice yet reaches you. Blinding and radiant.
So we have a cryo-heavy start to things.
It's a full Scion heavy. Like, there's a lot of cryo going on. Alphino leads what is essentially a previously on Final Fantasy XIV, but everyone takes part in it. Everyone gets a little moment to remember something important to them. But the whole thing comes down to the fact that we are gonna finally go and see Charlene. I guess the plan is to masquerade as quote-unquote associates of the students of Baldessian because everyone's got a stick so far up their butt in Charlene, we gotta lie to get inside.
Well, we do say we're adventurer. I said I was an adventurer, so I didn't lie, technically.
So that's the plan. We're gonna lie, depending on your choices later. You know, you may not lie. But then we get a slew of pretty great character moments on the docks. Like, we get a Rian J reminding Thanker that he tried to rob Louisoix when he first found him at the docks. Astenian asking Little Lord Alphino to dispense with the formalities. And even the best character in the entire game, Hoary Boulder, gets some voiced lines.
He escaped from his menage a trois and he's out and about.
Then we get Emmett narration, which we talked about in the last video.
Yep, that's a thing. It's happening.
Yep. But before we get to Charlene and Kyle, we hear, feel, think, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Heidelin appears in human, pure, Amoratine, Vena form?
Yeah, that's my personal theory. That's a personal
That's my theory too.
Okay, so we're gonna ride the Vena business.
I would really wish you would phrase it another way, but sure.
I don't really read into the here thing because I think she's just here so we don't have additional questions. Like, this is loaded enough without being like, wait, is that an elf? Why would she be an elf?
It's the only reason I think I still have questions. Welcome, if this is the first one of our videos you've ever watched, we don't know what happens next.
We play this like it's a TV show, weekly TV show. Welcome to the episode.
In the back of my head this whole time, I've been lightly wondering, like, what does an Amoratine look like behind their mask?
Right.
Because we saw a bunch of Amoritines in Amarat. They were very tall with black robes, and they had what I kind of call like the bird mask. They kind of remind me of like a canary or any sort of short-beaked bird. We find out Elidibus was the heart of Zodiark, but Elidibus appears to us riding the corpse of our buddy. And then when we finally see the true form of Elidibus, he's a tiny Amoritine with his bird mask on. So we still don't see like what's behind the mask. And so I think Hydaelyn appearing to us in human form is the only reason there's even still a question. Because if it was, I feel like anything other than human, we'd be like, oh, she's doing that terrible movie Contact thing where she's taking the form we thought would most please us. And if she looked like something we had never seen before, my brain would just go, oh, that must be Vina. That must be what the ancients looked like. But because she looks human, I still have questions. Kind of barely. Really what I'm saying is I admit to you, Kyle, that I don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is Vina, but I'm 90% convinced this is Vina because she's got the mask and it's down. And visually, I don't know what else to take that other than this is the ancient that became the heart of Hydaelyn unmasked.
And Elidibus set up this whole through line that you can become rather confused should you be ejected or perhaps projected or made a representative of your greater primal deity in this sense. So I kind of think it's Vina, as Alphino puts it. Also, when we met tiny Elidibus, which was the size that he was kind of like a child.
Little bis.
And all the cutscenes when we were viewing Elidibus's past were all pointing up at the other Amortines. So there was definitely a childlike stature. But he was not fully faced. He was still that grayed out mannequin kind of look under there. Was that a production thing? They weren't really sure how they were going to represent them yet. Was there artificial mystery placed on top of it so that we could keep that a mystery later on for Endwalker? It seems suspect that Hydaelyn would even choose a form when she's used the word of the mother in the past and just taken over Minfilia and later takes over Kryl.
Yes, which we get a tiny bit into later, but it doesn't go that much deeper. We'll talk about it when we get there. But well, she even gets into it here, I guess, actually, now that I think about it, because she says that appearing to us in this way taxes her. Talks about that as Zodiark's strength has grown, her strength has diminished, so it's getting even harder for her to interact with us. All this going on. Says this taxes me greatly. And then despite the fact that it does tax her greatly, she proceeds to be as cryptic as anciently possible.
A conjunction has begun to form, an intertwining of your time and mine. Wheels shudder and turn. Conflict looms, monumental, which will decide the fate of this world and all life upon it.
Intertwining your time and mine, another time, another age, there is going to be some sort of time travel going down in this expansion, be it magic, technology, or more likely, because this is how this always manifests in Final Fantasy XIV, magic technology.
So we're either going to go back in time to the final days, we're going to be back in time, witness something, or that time's going to come visit us in some sort of regard and have the splitting of the ways of the paths of the timeline.
Memories of a possible future.
To me, it just sounds like a lot of go level up, though. You know? Hey, you're level 80. You're going to be level 90 for this. You got to be level 90. Go get some levels under you and we'll talk later.
This game hands Kyle a beautiful platter of interesting lore puzzle boxes, and Kyle just goes, yes, thank you for gamifying my lore.
Well, it is a video game. You know, we got to make room for the actual playing of it. I think the weirdest part about this is the "Are you mad at me?" text in the middle of this, where she's like, Are you still mad at me? Well, yes, I am. I'm a little confused. Our relationship
I don't trust you because you're a primal, which if you choose that option, which I did, Hydaelyn owns up to it immediately. It doesn't seem offended by the fact that you're wondering what's going on.
And with Ysayle in tow, Iceheart, I feel like we're all set up for the lore of a very, very confused member of Hydaelyn's council, of the summoning squad, and the likely most confused person of that job would be Vina, the heart, as we've learned from Elidibus. So there's a lot saying that this is Hydaelyn, but at the same time, I think they're just confused.
Oh, I don't think that'd be a retread. I hope that's not the case. I think Elidibus was Elidibus, and we've already had. We also had La Habrea. We've had like 2 Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs ancients. If we do it a third time, I'm gonna be mad.
I think it works within the lore. I wouldn't be exhausted by it. This could be roleplay of what Hydaelyn would feel like because they think they're Hydaelyn because that's what Iceheart did when they thought they were the partner of a dragon.
Yeah, because why do this? Because if you take Labyrinthos as your first zone, not that long after this, we talked to Hydaelyn in an obscured fashion through Kryles. So yeah, I think this is very intentional. I think we're supposed to start. I think they want to send our brain in this direction, whether it's to intentionally misdirect or intentionally make me feel smart because I noticed it. Who knows? Actually, everybody watching knows.
But don't worry, because it's time for paperwork and signing and Estinian being too cool for everybody.
And Pokemon Yellow.
Pokemon Yellow? Oh, because because everyone follows you around. It's a cute bit of tech. They're very proud of it. They're very proud of their tech.
There's little odds and ends here, a lot of like personal reflection from the Baldessian students. But the important bit here is that we're heading toward the library. And we spend time sifting through, reading books. We find out that no publicly available books mention the final days. So instead, we have to play Final Days Feud, where Kryles quizzes us on what we know about the final days.
It was a nice touch. It would have been months for everybody else. It's been a few months for us even, and I was happy to ace the quiz.
It would have been over a year for some people. Maybe it was confirmed earlier and I just missed it, but to me, I was still operating under a theory that whatever happened in Amarat with monsters showing up was because the Amoratines and their creation magic, something went wrong. And Alphino seemingly confirms this. He has a line where he says, the chaos extended to the ancients themselves, causing their powers of creation to spiral out of control.
And my favorite part about it was that he brought up the keening again, the sound, which I love the idea of a sound that drives everybody mad. It's just badass. I've always loved the like sort of old James Bond pick up the phone and activates your assassin mode.
But the TLDR from all of this, Kyle, is that no information on the final days is available to the public. So something's going on in Charlean where we're assuming members of the forum are hoarding information that should be public from the world, but they themselves seem intimately aware of the final days because Fortuno himself has already mentioned it to us back at the end of Shadowbringers.
There is a knowledge fallacy going on here, and they continue to hint at it, but this is one of the biggest ones. You've got a whole society built on the preservation and the sharing of knowledge, and they ain't sharing all of it. It's not called Old Charlean.
Oh my God. The forum knows about the final days. They seem to very specifically think that we're wrong because they know about the final days and they don't think the criteria for the final days are currently being met. The plot thickens because we go have a nice little hangout with Dickon and his cafe and some pretty rude locals in Charlean. Charlean really not putting its best foot forward for me, Kyle. I find everyone in this town insufferable.
I think you're supposed to, yes.
Until we meet a really nice bun boy later, but more on him later and how I think maybe he's evil or something. I don't know. People are too hot to try for this character. While having said coffee, Alize notices that Gleaners, a new
faction, profession,
a new job, but not a job that you can play, that we're now being made aware of, are ferrying goods to Labyrinthos in alarming quantity. Like shortly before this, we're introduced to the concept of a Gleaner, which are trained scholars in Charlean that go and procure samples for essentially like a physical sample library deeper into Charlean, which turns out to be Labyrinthos, which we learn about in this lovely little scene with Alize, and I want some of that coffee.
It's very Smithsonian, with all the caveats that come with Smithsonians.
I can't go under the rope and touch the Stegosaurus?
Well, no, I meant more like the taking objects from Egypt and housing them in your place instead of Egypt. But, you know, they're going around the world taking everything in and not exactly sharing out.
No, I don't think they're particularly getting into the, you know, ethics of provenance, but, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if the Charleans are just stealing things from other cultures and claiming it as their own.
It's the red flag emporium. This whole thing, constant red flags.
Boy, for so much white marble, there sure are a lot of red flags.
Banners a-waving. Giant red flags throughout this entire business, and I love it.
We get down there with wonderful voiceover from Emmett.
Deep beneath the scholar's city shines a false sun within a fabricated sky.
There's something in his voice that makes it seem like he has a lot of love for people who have questionable organizational practices for lots and lots of books.
I think that tracks. I think he'd be down with the lab.
Looks like Epcot.
Smells like Epcot, must be Epcot.
Everyone's like makes jokes about how much I bring up Epcot, and here is Endwalker, the expansion where they literally added living with the land as a zone.
Yeah, they kind of have the dome roof thing and the fake sun and all the plants and animals. Yeah, they expect the school bus to pull up and let the kids out.
I love this zone so much, and it was a really big surprise. When given the option to go to a whole new zone or stay in Charlene, I'm looking at the map and I'm like, I mean, I want to wrap this up first because it feels like I should wrap this up first. We're already here, and we ended Shadowbringers on this note of Fortuneau disowning the twins, and I saw one person defend Fortuneau, and I just want to know.
Well, honestly, I think they're working with knowledge we don't have yet when he has his big breakdown and is probably a great father.
Well,
or
in that
something
case,
like
you're
that.
cheating, and that's cheating.
Or maybe he's possessed. There are some really interesting fatherly sprinkles throughout here about Fortuneau. Is he that bad now? Yes. Was he that bad in the past? We don't know. Do I want to see him cry in a corner when everything goes to hell around him? Yes.
Yes, I do. Anywho, we meet a bun boy named Aaronville. Y'all are very into him. Anyway, Aaronville was instructed by the Forum to collect animals fit for eating and breeding, Kyle.
Yep.
Probably not in that order. That would be that's a bad order if that's what you want them for. We're learning about the Gleaners. We're learning about Labyrinthos here. And it's all pretty human compared to how stuffy everything else in Charlene has been up to this point. Like, you get down, it's an actual farmland, and the soundtrack has like fiddles. It feels very country, which again, you could have given me 300 guesses on what it would be like to quest in Charlene, and I would never have ended on underground biodome with a really rural country vibe. This is one of the most wholly unique things I think I've seen in all of Final Fantasy XIV.
I wonder if they're doing the astronaut thing, now that I think about it. You know, because the astronaut is always from, like, Kansas and, you know, putting his thumb at the moon, and rural down, you know, southern boys who just want family and love but have to go on this great quest to the moon for the government.
But more on that later. But yeah, so we gotta get acquainted with Aaronville and what the Gleaners are up to, and we're off to Charlene's physical specimen library, the Archeon, I think. I'm not sure it was ever pronounced out loud. However, the Archeon is closed to the public. We try to get in. They tell us, nope, sorry, you can't. And then we're like, well, can we at least use your elevator? And they're like, nope, take a hike. So we do what we've been doing the entire time in Charlene, which is doing what we need to do anyway without asking people, and we sneak through a cave.
We are adventurers, after all. It's what we do. We're sleuthing.
We are the coolest sleuthers that ever sleuthed.
So stealthy are we, and such wonderful role players when it comes to frogs.
Before we get to Alpha Toad, though, our Warrior of Lights stumble on some glowing flowers. And then a random botanist, doesn't even have a name, but gets a voice, which is like the game's way of telling you, pay attention, this is important.
But they're more than pretty flowers. Heart blooms are attuned to ambient emotion.
It's obviously important. It doesn't seem like a MacGuffin. It doesn't seem like something that's going to be cheaply used. It seems like a mood ring. Like, this is going to be...
You're describing something cheap and MacGuffin-like.
I think this is a really cool idea to give emotion to your character who can't talk. I think in the future, this will be used as a way to say, hey, you're feeling this way in this situation.
I'm thinking the exact same thing, and I didn't really think about it in the moment because I was kind of like, wait, why are these flowers so freaking important? But yeah, they're called heart blooms. They're attuned to ambient emotion. They appear gray in Labyrinthos because everyone's so goddamn miserable because the Forum is such a bunch of old bastards.
Oh, sure.
They get bright and glowing when they're near joy. They get dark and dour when there's despair sensed around, and they've been around seemingly forever. You know, this botanist tells us the land of origin is completely unknown and that every culture gives it another name and another mythos, so trying to actually run down where these things originate from is basically impossible.
Just like Asm. All the cultures, it's been everywhere, it's ancient, has different names in many different places. This taking the form of flowers rather than a stone is very interesting because flowers so often in mythology come from blood, shrunken people. Yeah, it can get very grim fairy tale in that way.
Shrunken people?
Yeah, well, like, people turn into flowers after they've been cursed or loved by a god. I would love it if it was the blood of Hydaelyn or the moon that splashed on the planet and turned into flowers. But for now, I think it's going to be this tool the game can use to communicate to you, the audience, what your character's feeling. And as an Elzen, I appreciate that because I'm not really sure what I'm feeling sometimes.
Couldn't it also communicate how other people are feeling?
Oh, man, I would love that scene. Can you, that'd be so badass. Like you're talking to someone who's lying to you and it pans down to the flower in your hand. It's like going all red and crazy. And you're like, oh shit, they're nuts.
And then we move on to eavesdropping on Erenville with our buddies Alfie Toad and Alley Toad. Erenville mouths off to his boss.
I thought this was a really good balancing act because the boss is also doing its job. This boss isn't completely mustache twirling. Of course, we can read into the costuming that we have the shield. It's not quite like a helmet. You know, we're not being imperial, but you're not good enough to look me directly in the eyes energy.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's something behind this or if it's like a status thing. I would imagine not because Fortuno is not wearing one, doesn't wear a hat at all, and he seems to be in charge of this entire operation. When we get to the forum later, there's a bunch of folks not wearing the hat, and it's not just bun boys and bun girls that they didn't want to try and make a hat work on. It's other just random people aren't wearing these hats. But the important part about this scene is it sets in motion this thread of starting to piece together why the forum is acting in the way that it is.
In an age long past, Sharlayan was charged with a momentous duty. And now that word of the final days hangs heavy in the air, the time has come for us to fulfill that charge.
Alphino, like, straight up treats this like new information. Right after this, there's a little like unvoiced cutscene after the fact where Alphino basically gives us the cliff notes to the scene we just watched and treats this quote unquote momentous duty as new info. So what's important is Sharlayan was put on a path a long time ago by someone or something, and now they're making good on that duty.
Could be Emmett, because Emmett got his hands in all the pies. He had the Garlean pies, he had the Allegan pies. It would make sense that he was doing some Sharlayan pies too.
I think it's from some sort of revelation when they started investigating the Ethereal Sea, because we get more information about that once we reach the trial, which happens immediately after this, because we get caught by mall cops. First, we have to talk to Hydaelyn. Hydaelyn. Hydacrile.
Word of the tiny mother. I found this calming. Like, it's disturbing, sure. You know, probably shouldn't get possessed when sniffing the flowers. But I was concerned Kryl was having, like, a full-blown psychic attack.
I thought so. Yeah, I was worried something else was going to happen, or you can go watch me on stream. I was going to be very mad if they just took Kryl out of another expansion. Because
Stormblood, yep.
Stormblood,
into Shadowbringers.
We've been Kryl free for a little while here, but luckily that's not what's going on. Hydaelyn speaks to us through Kryl. Kryl, like right off the bat, is just like, here, take this flower. Don't worry, I enchanted it not to die. She told me you'll need it for the journey ahead. Hands it to us and then goes full just possessed. And I'm just sitting there going, I just spent like 3 hours worth of reading, talking to Aaronville and Marmots, and we couldn't have eased ourselves into this little experience a little smoother, slower.
I mean, something was wrong. She was becoming obsessed with the flowers. Maybe that's where she was hearing things. I was confused. I thought she was reacting to all the animals being captured up because I misunderstood. I think a lot of the audience has as well, with a little bit of like Final Fantasy V mixed in.
There's a Kryl in Final Fantasy V that can understand animals. There is insinuations in Final Fantasy XIV that Kryl can like vibe on the energy or the feelings that other beings are giving off, but it's a lot more. It's not as explicit.
And then you got the Pikachu sweater. It's very easy to be like, the ears. Yeah, you can talk to animals. This makes sense. Okay, but that is not the case. And that happened all the way back in Heavensward. Like the last time we got any information on Kryl outside of she's really, really good at staying vigil while people are ill.
And making Alphino feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, like that's like our biggest scene with Kryl we've had up to this point.
And so we get more information from Hydaelyn.
It has become arduous for me to interact with the physical world without assistance. Though I might converse with you for a time, the incorporeal form I assumed on the ship would be incapable of casting even the simplest enchantment.
And then goes on to inform us, as if it's really important to know this, that her power is actually the greatest in the depths of the ethereal sea, and goes on to tell us that that's where she ferried Minfilia's soul to the sea here in the source. I'm like, wait, I thought the ethereal sea was just its own thing. Like, does it have locations? I'm confused by this line.
Sea ports, so maybe the connective points between the various worlds and stars.
Is there like ethereal sea lanes or highways?
Could be. I mean, we can go back to the old PowerPoint and look at the ethereal sea mentioned there, but it was more like a Gaia-like gathering places for life energies.
Yeah, I don't remember anything in there about like there being ethereal sea locations specific to each star, but that's kind of how Hydaelyn makes it sound in this scene. And where my eyebrows perk up so much they almost fly off my head is when Hydaelyn says,
Her, and another who may yet have a part to play, though that will depend on you.
Another dead person is currently narrating my entire adventure through this game, and I would be very excited to see that person again.
Oh, okay. So you're suggesting that Emmett, in transit of death, was like grabbed by Hydaelyn and taken to heaven? Like, not really, but you know,
I mean, maybe it is. If there's
taken into her care.
If there's different locations, if there's like literal spots within the ethereal sea that I don't know how far to take. I haven't thought about this too much. I really don't know how to take. I think the whole like Hydaelyn saying took her to the sea here is weird to me. I don't know what to make of that. But maybe you're onto something. Maybe there is. If this is the afterlife, it is the ethereal sea, maybe there is something akin to heaven and hell or just like different locations there within. Right? Because, I mean, Emmett, while we know spent a lot of time on the first as well, sure seemed to kind of plant his roots here on the source.
But it's this language here that makes me feel like that's not Vana on the boat, because we're having Word of the Mother powers and then referencing that moment as well. Like, that's not a escaped heart convict telling lies anymore. Those were the same person.
Well, this is why I think everything is sincere, because she's talking about ferrying Minfilia, like out of respect, right? And then there's also this line, her and another who may yet have a part to play. I think this is referencing Emmett, because Emmett is currently narrating our entire damn adventure. And is dead. And so I think that's why I'm thinking Hydaelyn is Vana, Vana is Hydaelyn. We know Vana is Hydaelyn. We know that. That is a fact, as presented to us by the game. And here we've seen Hydaelyn in a form we've never seen before, with a mask that looks very much like what we've seen on Elidibus, what we've seen on Hythlodeus, what we've seen on the Amoritines, but it's down and it's off. Visually, that tells me this is an unmasked, quote-unquote, ancient. All of this makes me think they're not trying to overburden us with someone being sly, someone being sneaky here. I don't think Hydaelyn is going Elidibus on us here. I don't think Hydaelyn is confused. I think this is Hydaelyn, which means I think this is Vana, and I think Vana and Hydaelyn are paying respects to those that were important to them, Minfilia and their friend Hades, or their once friend Hades.
I mean, you've got invested interest for Emmett to come back. So this is new to me. I wasn't thinking this way. I was like, oh yeah, people have died. And we have the situation where Minfilia was grabbed up in transit by Hydaelyn. And it would make sense in sort of a heavenly sort of way if Emmett, on his way out, performed the good deeds of leaving the crystals and helping his friend Elidibus, that Hydaelyn would, in that godlike figure, say, ooh, nice job. Would you like to come with me? And grabbed him out of transit. Plus, we had the whole, like, crystal broken thing and the Thancred breaking the crystal, the Orosite that was a little gray.
Yeah, I've had some people after the fact, like, come and tell me, like, no, he's definitely dead. And I'm like, I don't want to know that. Like, I don't like that. Like, I think it's still a little ambiguous.
They said that
personally.
about a good Setsu, though. Like, people lie in order to enhance the journey.
But that's fair. Yeah, I don't trust any of you. I think it's important that Emmett, I think it's telling that Emmett is doing all of this narration. If Emmett was just the narrator for the trailer, I could easily put that in the back of my mind as this is because they know their audience. It's a little bit of fanfare because everyone loves this character. Let's go. But because Emmett is also the for every new zone that we find ourselves in so far in Endwalker, I'm working off what the game has taught me. Ardbert was our narrator for every zone in Shadowbringers. Not for the trailer, that was Graha, but for the zones, it was Ardbert. And pretty quickly, we run into Ardbert again, and he ends up being a major fixture of that entire expansion. So I don't think that's necessarily what I want, but I do think we will see Emmett again in some form or fashion. If we're not going to get literal time travel, but if we're going to get people from our and the greater past coming back through some ethereal sea shenanigans.
Well, and Emmett makes the most sense because of old crystal powers, right? Then we would actually have a reason, an ability to influence that decision. When she says that'll depend on you, if it's Moonbrita, like, yeah, bring it back. Like, what's the question? What's the issue? Like, let's bring back Papa Limo. Okay, do it. Like, there's no question there. Guy was neat. Like, just bring it back. Why would we have any influence over that?
Right? Like, so if anything, I think it's Ardbert or it's Emmett.
But Ardbert is inside us.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we fully merged with Ardbert, right? Yeah, so never mind. Emmett makes the most sense. He's very integral to us, the Warrior of Light. Papa Limo was integral to Lise. Moonbrita was integral to Orion J.
And if they want to pull an Avatar kind of all your past selves sort of lineup, I'm down with that. We can do the Council of Ourselves with Ardbert and however many might
shit,
have.
I didn't even think about that. That would be dope. I'm thinking more
That'd be awesome.
I'm thinking more like on your left endgame, freaking portals open up and Haurchefant steps out next to Iceheart, next to Papa Limo, next to masked plant lady that got kicked to death.
They're all great themes. They're all great energies. We had the ghost children from the weapon trials. Like, obviously, this world is magical, enchanted, and capable of afterlives and influence spirits.
I'm really focused on the ethereal sea here because of the trial that comes after this. Let's get straight into trial because I think it's all a part of this conversation that we're having right now. Y'shtola immediately puts the forum on blast in the middle of this trial, outing the fact that we now know of the cryptic duty of an age long past, which Graha's then like, wait, huh? I read something about something in a book down in the layers that I wasn't supposed to be in, but this kind of corroborates what I learned.
He learns the most important part, and that would be the 270 years ago was the date that things changed course.
It's sort of, yeah, the way he describes it makes it seem like he was an eventual kind of figuring out, but like at first I thought he was just kind of like dunking on the forum by saying, listen, what I've noticed is someone who now knows quite a bit about doing your civic duty and running a city, which I love. It's like his character sheet leveled up, and if he was in a game of D&D, he would become inspired because he's playing to his character.
He did play SimCity for 100 years there.
Yes. Yes, but I thought he was just dunking on them, saying that, you know, knowledge was no longer being preserved for the benefit of society, but that they warped society for the benefit of knowledge.
It's a dunk.
It does seem like a dunk, right? But he also says, hey, it kind of seems like you changed your society roughly 270 years ago. And then Y'shtola comes in and explains it for people like me who are like, that seems important, but I don't know how, and says, isn't that exactly when Sharlayan scholars began officially studying the Ethereal Sea? And so, yes, there's all this talk of the Ethereal Sea, all of it. We've had PowerPoints about it going all the way back to Realm Reborn, and now in 2 scenes basically back to back, we have our primal god Hydaelyn talking about it, and it also gets brought up as the point where the Sharlayans started getting shady.
And shady do they get indeed, in one of my favorite tropes, which is the, I'm about to give information, but then, I can't, because I'm enchanted, I'm cursed, I've got a bomb in me, whatever it may be.
Is that what's going on here? I think it's super weird that no one reacted to the fact that this man choked on his tongue in the middle of everybody.
You can dismiss this, but to me, you can't, because who speaks next? Fortuno. He's the one to cover it up. If it was someone else jumping on board, or we were just trading around people, what my colleague means to say, yes, I'd still be very excited because I love this trope. But Fortuno being this leader of the forum does make it a little suspect.
I'm not reading into it as much. I think it's just over drama for the sake of over dramatism, because the Scions don't mention it either. And they've mentioned everything that seems amiss up to this point.
There's no way this was unintentional. So if someone was doing the voice line, they're like, keep it, it's good. Next line, please. I am not dismissing this. This is my new Ascian Prime.
I'm dismissing it. I think it's just a poor choice of drama. Monteshane is a bit of a bro, calms everyone down, says what we're all thinking. But it doesn't matter. They vote us out of Sharlayan anyway. Kind of. Like, you can stay in the city, but if we see you around here anymore, like, you're all getting expelled.
The stakes are appropriate. They are kind of low, like no one's going to behead us because of this, but they're appropriate for the situation. You talk too loud in the library.
I don't know. I think the stakes are pretty high. If we get in trouble again, I'm going to have to listen to Fortuno talk. I loved this. Like, I love it. I love how awful Fortuno is, and the forum in general. Just a bunch of old men just sitting in their freaking ivory tower.
I like the subtlety. I like the nuance, the gray they're adding here, and even the gray they put in Fortuno. Because being 270 years ago, this isn't all his fault. He's not some mastermind of this project.
No, he's a blind follower.
Yeah, he became a blind follower at some point. And this next scene, to me, communicates that point was when he realized he was responsible for other lives. His children.
Oh, interesting.
And see, that's like the crumb of sweetness. The one tiny little strawberry on top of parfait of shit.
But then the path that he went down ended in him disowning the children that he's trying to protect.
But, well, now he's sniffing his own farts. He's too far gone in this crusade he's on to save the world as the Sharlayans see it. But there was a time where he was at least concerned about his kids, wanted to train them, wanted to be a part of their lives, but his job took precedence over and over again until it became so distant that they are now enemies to him.
Well, before we end on what I think is going to be even more cooking, we should at least bring up the fact that we met Mommy Levier. She shows up and gives the twins some new threads.
Yep, and a gun.
Four guns.
Four flying guns, like you do. Happy 16th birthday.
Yeah, she's very kind, she's very nice, has very fond opinions of the Warrior of Light. But let's go back to cooking, because other than I like their outfits, I have nothing to say about that scene other than I'm glad one of their parents is nice.
Nice, but not defending.
No. It was played for laughs when she's like, oh, just be careful, because otherwise Fortuno is going to punish the servants. And I'm just like, I realize like Kryle's giggling right now, but I'm like, hey, Mommy Levier, shouldn't you be like fighting a little harder for the treatment of the of the servants?
They've got the biggest house in town. They are disconnected, one could say. A
little bit. But the game doesn't seem to call that into question at any point. Okay, so back to the whole thing. Back to everything that's going on here. We've got everything going on with the Ethereal Sea. my little pet theory that some form of time travel is going on, but I don't know if it's going to be that literal. I don't think it's going to be literal time travel. I think we're going to be revisited by our friends from the past and also notable beings from the past that we may not know directly through some kind of shenanigans with the Ethereal Sea. Seems way too important to this first chapter here. If you decide to start in Charlian, I think that's going to be a major crux of Endwalker. The other thing we put away and didn't pick up was your thoughts about like the astronaut business. Like you think that Charlians are trying to make themselves self-sufficient so they can just survive the apocalypse.
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right. Fortuno says, and
we will never choose the way of the sword. We will fulfill our mission not through strife and bloodshed, but survival.
I don't know what it is. Are they in league with the Talaferoi? Are they in league? Have they been promised that they will be spared if they but stay the hell out of the way? And so they're just working to make sure that their bomb shelter is the best bomb shelter in town?
Right. Did an Ascian show up and be like, you guys are going to be super smart if I pull this off, so hang on and have enough marmots ready for the apocalypse? All those sort of questions would be at the forefront of my mind if we hadn't gotten rid of all the unsundered Ascians. But since we have, we know that there's the essentially cultists running around in our Fandaniels, but they don't seem the mastermind type here. To me, whatever they discovered in the Ethereal Sea prompted this organically for them, and over time has become more militant. I love the idea of anybody planning for a lifetime beyond their own, and Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have elvish races in the Tolkien sense that live on forever and could enact this plan. It's telephone at this point. 270 years ago, someone came up with a plan and passed that on, and it could have become corrupted by the time we see it now. Are they going to shields up and survive the end of days, or are they going to take us to the moon? Is it a Charlayan spaceship we're going to ride? I think those are both decent answers.
I think it might be a bit of a combination of the two, right? Like, because I think of the fact, like, it was 270 years ago. We know, like, Elysin lived slightly longer than everyone else, but it's roughly like 90 to 100 people die. So Charlians are continuing onward a duty that was set roughly 3 generations ago. They don't care. I don't think they care if they survive. And if, again, I'm also hanging on Graha's mention of you went from knowledge for the betterment of society to society for the salvation of knowledge. I think they want just enough so that some stewards can survive. It's like the Library of Alexandria. Like, what if you knew the end was coming and you knew you were the greatest source of all information and knowledge? If all you really care about is knowledge, that's what you want. That's your eternal life. You want that to live on. You want to protect that. You don't really care about yourself or other people at that point.
We could have a Protean situation where this is all a cycle. There's always an end of days and we continue to repeat ourselves. And if we can preserve that knowledge through the apocalypse, the next generation might have the answers then. But I kind of put that in the pile with like getting introduced to the statue god. I don't think we're going to do gods in this expansion. I think we're going to continue to build that lore. We can use that. That's a thread we can pull later on, just like when you pick a god when you're making your character. It's not a terribly important thing right now, but it is world building.
I think we're going to find out that they were all just a game of telephone, of oral history of the convocation of 14.
I agree. And that works perfectly into the Azem, Azim, Azumers, and all that sort of stuff that Oriange went off about. But we're off to our brocation.
Brocation? Oh, Thavnair.
Yeah, we're going to Thavnair. Bro!